People who work at call centers, how do you keep your sanity? On my last job in a call center, I got used to not taking anything personal and just let my mind go somewhere else when people would get rude or annoying, and I just thought, oh, my friends are going to laugh so hard when I tell them what this asshole just said to me. That was until one day this lady started asking if I was dumb or if I just didn't understand English because I sounded so stupid. So I laughed it off until she hung up and went to text my friends about it, and they go, "Well, that sounds hard. Are you okay?" And I immediately started crying. Lol, people can be so rude and for no reason, but they're most likely just assholes to everyone else too. It's nothing personal. I had a customer say something similar to me and I just snapped and said, I have a master's degree and I work at a call center because I am an immigrant and there is racism in this country. Do you think I want to work here? Plus, English is my third language. How many languages do you speak? As I said it, I knew I might get fired for it and I was on a bit of an adrenaline high, but I still said it because I was like, FCK it. I hate this job anyway. Sometimes it just gets too much. The customer was stunned to silence. Anyway, I did solve her issue afterwards, as I was gonna do anyway. Didn't get fired either. Supervisor definitely heard it but didn't say anything. I had the same thing happen to me at my restaurant job. Was taking a phone order and a lady said I was an uneducated R-word. I was called a lot at that job, but that just got to me and I started crying. Told her she was incredibly rude and hung up. I have a master's degree, and at that point in my life I was struggling to find a job in my field. It just hit harder that day, and luckily my managers backed me up when she called back and refused her order. God, I feel that it's the ones that decide to absolutely mail it personal. They're generally taking their shit out on you because you're the front line, but the real abusive ones will make it clearly about you, and those are difficult to shake off. You can tell those are the ones IRL that take everything out on everyone nearby and they feel bad for their family. TBH, it doesn't help that I have rejection-sensitive dysphoria too. ADHD. When that happens, it literally becomes full-on panic attack that I've failed to. My sup is usually good with me pinging him and saying I need 5 minutes to collect myself, but fuck, it's bad. Our place won't let us hang up on the abusive ones either. One time this customer was being so abusive that I had to put her on hold because I was sobbing. My supervisor at the time took me off the call and made me sit at his desk for a few minutes to get me to calm down. I don't know how many times I've cried at this job or had to comfort someone else because they were crying. I also take Xanax for my anxiety, and usually work is the thing to get me to take one. It's either the customers or the extremely unprofessional management. Honestly, this entire thread just reminds me how much I hate my job. I wish I could quit, but I can't. Our partnered companies used to give us branded office supplies, and one time I ended up with a 1,000-sheet square notepad. I didn't take pencil and paper notes that often, so they just sat there for a long time. Eventually, while listening to a customer tear a strip off of me for something that was out of my control, I decided to look up the instructions to make a basic origami frog. 4 months later, I had an array of tiny origami sculptures all around my desk. It was a really calming process that helped me deal with the mind-sucking monotony that is a call center. I also started working on improving my drawing skills. I would find retro Art Deco stuff online and copy it onto pads of paper. My crowning moment was covering a blank white box in Soviet-era propaganda. It sat proudly on my monitor for a week, and when I came back one day it was gone and the entire call center had received a group email about inappropriate imagery on our workstations. Godspeed, pen and ink drawing of Yuri Gagarin. CC worker as well until recently when I moved to document processing. I picked up drawing, specifically pointillism. I figured I'd try to emulate things I had seen that I liked to get the hand of actually drawing, as I was never good at it. I basically haven't drawn since we all work from home and I can do things like YouTube between calls or during breaks. But here are a couple that I have done that's in my phone. Banksy's girl with the balloon. A realistic heart. I should draw again. and some more original things too. I am a photographer, woodworker and blacksmith, so I've got a creative side. I'm sure I can come up with something original. Edit. Pointillism is great because once you've got your image drawn out mostly and are onto shading, you can do it anywhere. I was drawing most of those too while on the bus because all I was doing was making dots with the Micron pen. Man, they never would have let us draw in hours. There was strict no phone, no paper, no books rules at a third-party Verizon support center, Teleperformance USA, to protect sensitive customer information. I could understand it if we were taking down stuff like credit card hashes, or sensitive banking info, but we were literally just first-tier IT support and they didn't want us writing down names and addresses, as if we'd want that info anyways. I worked at a help desk at my university, and I'd get a handful of bad calls. Most of the bad calls would be about parents frustrated they can't helicopter parent their child's grade in college. I quickly realized most people who vented just wanted to get some stress off their chest. So instead of paying attention to it, I'd just watch regular show on my laptop. It made work easier to not lose my mind through all the nonsense they spewed out. I've graduated now, but to this day regular show is still my go-to comfort show. I used to work in a call center for a bank. I'd often have to transfer calls to other departments, but we also had to type up a brief description of every call and we were targeted on the time we took to do so. You'd press a button that prevented further calls coming through while you typed it up, so obviously management were strict on how long you spent. I got around it by putting them on conference call instead of transferring it. Then I'd mute myself and type up the call description while the customer and the other advisor chatted. One day I decided it would be fun to unmute myself and make random silly noises. Neither the customer or the other advisor knew I was on the call, so they would both assume it was the other person and maybe they had some sort of Tourette's. I'd unmute and go blah or blur. Once I even did a full moo like a cow. Maybe at that point I had actually lost my sanity. Long ago and far away I worked in the grill at a fast food place. I had a headset so I could hear the drive-thru orders even though I wasn't taking the order. One slow day our order taker was talking to a customer in a robot voice. While that was funny in itself, the customer was getting audibly flustered. So he says to her, "Would you like me to transfer you to a human?" And she very gladly says yes. At this point our manager is huffing his way to the back. Quick as a whip he changes his voice to a bad impersonation of gangster talk, and says, "Hey man, what's up? What you want?" Everyone who had a headset, including our Angie manager, had to take a few minutes to recuperate because we were laughing so hard. He didn't even get in trouble. I and a few others made up this game called Pushpin. You use those little colored pushpins, and each team gets a color. You attack opponents by walking by their cubicle casually and putting one of your color pins in. When two other teammates have attacked, and you have 3 in a row, that person is converted to your team. Of course, other teams will interrupt your scoring, and you have to be careful not to reveal the game to management, but it kept us amused for a while. Yeah, the ones who weren't insane were the ones who quit. You've got to be deeply damaged to thrive long-term. In my case I was the abuse I faced as a child makes this look like Sunday brunch type of damaged. It took my getting pregnant and being annoyed that I couldn't tell customers they were being so shitty to a pregnant person to make me realize I maybe deserved better and should pursue a different career path. Cause like, the reason I was annoyed I couldn't tell them was because I knew they'd be mortified. Which meant both that they knew their behavior was wrong, and that I knew they shouldn't be doing it, and both sides had just agreed not to acknowledge that. I'll tell ya, becoming a parent can do wonders for your sense of personal boundaries. The call center experience also meant I insisted that my son have a typical name, because my mother got real creative when naming me and callers were never sure which type of racism to use. And I'm white, so I couldn't just own it and be like, "Excuse you, I am a proud, insert ethnicity here," because 1, and 2, if I tried to say I was white I'd just get called a liar. I wasn't allowed to just introduce myself by a more common name because of some accountability policy we had. too. One time, someone insisted on knowing where I'd been born, and just flat out wouldn't take Iowa for an answer. Eventually demanded my supervisor, and I was happy to fully risk getting fired to say, "Okay, I think he's from Kansas, is that alright?" Fortunately that call never got reviewed. I didn't talk back often, but I really couldn't resist. I swear my mom thought she was naming a D&D character when she had me. There's no convincing someone you're American when you've got the name of a half-elf, no matter how monolingual and untraveled your accent is. But I can at least confirm that there is a significant overlap between racists and people who need someone to hold their hand through an online forum where the hardest question is what is your credit card number, and common troubleshooting was have you tried clicking the OK button? The as in people drive me nuts. A as in, B as in, C as in. The whole point in the phonetic alphabet is to replace the single letter. Just say Alpha Beta Charlie. I made it 3 years. After 2 years, I was so unhappy, I went to the U of Phoenix so I could get a degree. $30K in debt, but I got out of the call center and not MNIS. It was the repetition that really killed me. I need variety and creativity in my work. There were people in the call center for decades, and they were perfectly content. That just don't work with my personality. I work in a call center in a management position, meaning I handle customers that are extremely delinquent in payment or otherwise unruly. I've been at it for nearly 5 years now and I honestly am not dead inside yet. It helps that the company I work with when I started treated its employees like human beings and really gave us incredible benefits and just cared about us as people. We were bought out by another company who I can't speak so highly of. However, I work remote from home now and that's a massive perk, not to mention no pay cut when this new company does not pay their other employees worth a damn. Truthfully, I just take most people for what they are, people. There are some who are just vile people through and through no matter what the situation, but most of the customers I interact with are people going through something in their lives and talking to a stranger about financial struggles isn't easy. There are some calls where I bring that up to let them know that I am not looking down on them and that I've been in pretty low places financially myself. They aren't alone. It's not the easiest job mentally. It can really wear you down sometimes. Some days you get nothing but people who are angry at the world and unload that on you. But I try to focus on the good in my calls through the day. I usually will deem someone I speak with my star customer of the day in my head. For example, a woman I spoke with yesterday had forgotten her ID number. Not an issue. We can pull accounts so easy with just a name. And she was apologizing over and over for it. I told her she didn't need to apologize, it is just as easy to pull her account with her name and I could get her the ID number to jot down for future use. She told me she had a book with account information for all of her accounts and someone she spoke to earlier in the day was extremely nasty to her for not having the account ID and it made her feel really dumb and she just didn't want to bother me with the same trouble. I told her to forget that guy and it's no trouble for me to do my job and get her the information she needed. She promised that now that she has the ID number again she will just use the automated system and not bother us ever again. I told her I hoped she would speak with us again someday if she feels like it because we will be happy to hear from her. And at the end of the conversation, she told me I was a great person to speak to and made her feel so much better from the day she had been having with losing her book. Focus on the good, vent to a coworker or friend about the bad, annoying and let it go. And it helps when you have a management team who gets that some calls are doomed from the start. And, if you work for a company where this is possible, try to help people who are struggling if you have an option to. Had a customer who had fallen very behind at one time but made payments religiously once she got back on track. The account itself continued running behind but we worked with her because she was working with us. When she got to her final payment, she had a massive late fee balance because of the account running behind for so long. Told her because she worked so hard to keep those payments coming in each month until she reached the end, I would be waiving them in full from the account and she would be in ownership and her agreement fulfilled. She cried, told me she was planning to pay the fees with that final payment and it was her son's birthday that weekend and that fee balance basically took anything she had to put towards a gift and a cake for him and she was so happy she could do that for him now. So yeah. Do good even when you don't know how good it will be for the person on the other line. It makes the job feel a little better. I absolutely love your optimism and perspective. I don't work in a call center either. I'm a server in a restaurant and this applies to us as well. I feel all this applies to anyone who works with the general public on a regular basis. Some people are just angry and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's so important to acknowledge that. Also important to try your best to be kind, extra kind, when you can. Because you never know what someone is going through. I had a lady come in with her husband and from the moment I greeted them, I could tell they just seemed so tired. Something about them was off, and I couldn't figure out what it was and I definitely didn't want to ask. So I talked with my manager and got their check taken care of. I went back out and told them a stranger had paid their tab and they were free to go whenever they felt ready. They didn't say much and the woman started crying and so I walked away. They left and I went to clear their table and they had left behind the little thank you card, with the message inside. Turns out, they had recently had a baby who unfortunately wasn't born in the best of health, and it was their first dinner outside of the hospital in over a month. They mentioned how they knew they shouldn't be spending their money on dinner, but they were tired of hospital food in rooms, so the fact that their check was taken care of was a weight off their shoulders. I had a customer once that had been on the phone the entire day trying to get someone to help her. It turned out to be a stupidly simple thing to do and apparently no one else had realized what she was asking for or something. She basically just wanted to activate her card. I explained the mobile app and website and she asked if I would stay on just in case while she tried it. I stayed on, even though it's against policy. And when she finally got it she took a second of just wait. It worked, and them saw the balance on her card, somewhere in the ballpark of $10,000 on an unemployment card, and started excitedly spouting everything she was going to do with it. She was going to finally fix her car and be able to stay in her apartment and take her dog to the vet and just all this good. She was so happy. It was my last day that week and I was on the verge of losing it, but she wiped out all the crap from that whole week and smiled the rest of the day just knowing how happy she must be to get started on all of the great things that she could do now. The good helps more than anything. I used to work in collections for a financial services company. I also had one of the highest rates of promises to pay and outright collection dollars. It got to the point where I had a reputation within the company, and would often handle harder files and whatnot. I was good at skip tracing as well, so that helped a bit. Anytime I was asked why I was successful, I told them the same thing: treat them like people and use a bit of empathy. I've been in active collections, and I know what it's like to be hounded, and I, like a lot of others, know what it's like to be pressured and outright harassed. They don't get any kind of decent response from me, and honestly, no one else will either. Attract more flies with honey, blah blah. Basically, I'd start a conversation and just listen. Then, instead of trying to demand the whole damn thing at once, or making vague threats, I'd just work with them on something that was reasonable. I also know what it's like to be strapped for cash, and how even a tiny payment can upset your whole budget for your current check. Sometimes even token payments can be enough to help the customer work towards clearing it up. The biggest thing I kept reminding myself was simply that the company wasn't going to go broke from these debts. Companies who work with debt, especially financial services, have debt budgeted in, and it's typically always far higher than their current outstanding. That obviously doesn't matter to a customer, but getting token payments helps them out too. Less phone calls. The other trick, as I kind of alluded to, was being good at skip tracing, being able to track people down and contact them in ways they weren't expecting, legally. Of course, I have some morals. Was a great way to catch them off guard and get results you want. But yeah, it's hard. But empathy and understanding go a hell of a long way. But no sympathy, 'cause then you just let everyone off the hook. That said, I don't miss that job at all. The debt collecting was hard enough, but the rest of the job was sales, and I wasn't hired for sales, and I'm certainly no salesman.